And so he says, وَالْقَلْبُ الثَّانِي ضِدُّ هَذَا. The second heart is the opposite of this, meaning the first heart we did was the heart which is living, the heart which is connected to Allah and His Messenger. He says the second heart is the opposite. وَهُوَ الْقَلْبُ الْمَيِّتُ الَّذِي لَا حَيَاةَ بِهِ. It is that diseased heart, that dead heart that has no life in it. Remember, focus on the objective here. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is the uh, absolute spiritual doctor, there is no spiritual doctor more perfect than him. He taught us that our heart is what will make or break our actions. I'm saying things I don't want to. I'm doing things I don't want to. It's consistent. I can't remove that. I can't stop that. He says it's the heart which is the focus of that. In his hadith, he says that ala wahiya al-qalb. That إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله. If you reform and fix the heart, the rest of you will fix and it will come in line. But if the heart is unrefined, if it is corrupted, if you don't work on the heart, then it will remain the same. And again, this is very important that, me and you are sat here thinking to ourselves, asking ourselves, what can I do to fix the heart? And so the author begins with an exposition on the different categories of the heart. And he's going to expound on that from the Quran. And so the first thing he's taught us of is the refined heart. That heart which is connected to Allah. That heart which is living and breathing in many senses. The second heart, which we're starting on today, وَالْقَلْبُ الْمَيِّتُ الَّذِي لَا حَيَاةَ بِهِ. It is the diseased and the dead heart that has no life in it. فَهُوَ لَا يَعْرِفُ رَبَّهُ. It does not even know its Lord. Ask yourself, I ask myself, what do I know about Allah? Beyond the platitudes or beyond the kind of common things that we say, Allah is one and there is nothing like Him and Allah is all loving and caring. Some of these things that we've learned as children, what do I know about Allah on a more personal level? From His names, what do I understand of Him? What do I know of Him? And if my heart feels dead, it's because I've not given it the nourishment to come to life. Me and you know this. We see this very simply. Our bodies are created from the earth. This is no surprise to anybody, right? Our bodies, our flesh, our bone, these things, they are created from the ground and we return to that same ground. And so the nourishment for your body comes from the ground. Think about that every bit of food that you will ever consume in your life comes from the ground. The animals, they are eating their food from the ground, and the animals that we consumed, they were nourished from the very same ground. The fruits, the vegetation, the whatever it is, even if it's something that's gone through many, many different processes, it's still coming or at some point it finds its roots in the ground. And so the point that we're making is the nourishment for your physical body comes from the ground because it was created from the earth. Your soul, my soul, our arwah, our ruh was not created from the ground. Our ruh was created in Jannah. It is something that was created in the alamul arwah, in the world of the souls. It's a complete different dimension. It's a different world. And so our nourishment of that soul cannot come from the earth. Our nourishment for that soul has to come from the place that it was created, which is from the heavens. And that's something Allah and His Messenger will teach us. And that's really the understanding of when you have that deep yearning within you at certain points in your life. When a person, and you'll see this at the extremes, a person will, the kind of banality of existence is seen at the extremes of our existence. When things are really, really bad or things are really, really good, just after it gets really, really good, there's that emptiness that you still feel. You've been working towards an achievement, you've been working towards a goal, you've been working towards something. Your own apartment, your own place, your own this, your new car, all of these things, the brand new mobile. But there comes a point just after, the tipping point, just after you get it, there's an emptiness. Or it's on the other side of the spectrum where things go completely wrong, everything falls apart, and there is an emptiness therein. And that emptiness cannot be found and filled with anything but that which is in the heavens. And so the author says, فَهُوَ لَا يَعْرِفُ رَبَّهُ. You don't know your Lord. وَلَا يَعْبُدُهُ بِأَمْرِهِ. And neither do you worship Him the way He expects you to. وَمَا يُحِبُّهُ وَيَرْضَاهُ. And neither do you love Him and neither do you aim to please Him. How can a person love Allah when they don't know Allah? بَلْ هُوَ وَاقِفٌ مَعَ شَهَوَاتِهِ وَلَذَّاتِهِ. Rather, this person's entire existence and this person's entire focus is how can I fulfill my desires? How can I make myself happy? How can I please myself? وَلَوْ كَانَ فِيهَا سَخَطُ رَبِّهِ وَغَضَبِهِ. Even if that constitutes the displeasure and the anger and the wrath of my Lord. It doesn't matter. Me, I'm the most important person. This idea of I'm at the center of my existence. I'm at the center of my universe. فهو لا يبالي إذا فاز بشهوته وحظه رضي ربه أم سخط. So long as my desires are pleased, so long as my the things I want in life are acquired, it doesn't matter whether my Lord is pleased or displeased. فهو متعبد لغير الله, and he is worshipping other than Allah, حبا وخوفا ورجاء ورضا وسخطا وتعظيما وذلا. You are willing to take humiliation for other than Allah. We talked about the heart that's living. The heart that's living is willing to submit and is willing to show a level of humiliation for Allah. But you see, a person thinks humiliation for Allah, why should I humble myself? But when you really think to yourself, you're still humiliating yourself for other things. You're still humiliating yourself for the pursuit of this world. You might overgo certain principles, overlook certain principles. You might do different things. Your entire focus are these desires. In ahabba li hawahu. When you love people, you love them because they give you something. There's something for you to gain from them. Again, like, you have to ask yourself, how much of this is me? How much of my relationships with people is because they give me something? It's an entirely id motivated, a kind of ego motivated, an ego driven objective. That is what I can gain from this. وَإِن مَنَعَ مَنَعَ لِهَوَاهُ. And when you say no to somebody, even that's for your sake. فَهَوَاهُ آثَرُ عِنْدَهُ وَأَحَبُّ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ رِضَى مَوْلَاهُ. His desires and his pleasures are more important and take a precedence to him than his Lord's pleasure. فَالْهَوَى إِمَامُهُ. His desires are his leader. وَالشَّهْوَةُ قَائِدُهُ. And his desires, the caprice and the desires that this person has, قَاعِدُهُ, they are the things that are leading him and guiding him. وَالْجَهْلُ سَائِسُهُ. His ignorance is his manager. Right? His ignorance is the thing that's managing him and controlling him. And a person doesn't know, a person doesn't have an interest in knowing, that's it. I'm just going to continue. I'm just going to continue in this fashion for years and years and years and years. It doesn't even cross our minds. وَالْغَفْلَةُ مُرَكِّبُهُ. And his driver is his ghafla, his negligence. فَهُوَ بِالْفِكْرِ فِي تَحْصِيلِ أَغْرَاضِهِ الدُّنْيَوِيَّةِ مَعْمُورٌ. This person is entirely besotted by his acquisition of this world. And again, focus on this. Remember, we started by saying there is nourishment of the body, and that comes from the earth, because the body comes from the earth. There is nourishment for the soul, and that comes from the heavens. That comes from the heavens because that's where the soul comes from. Now, take that further. You will see yourself, people acquiring amazing things in this world, people getting everything they can. But the nature of the nafs is it always wants more. The nature of the nafs, you can promise yourself and convince yourself and make a deal with yourself, after this point this will happen, or after this point I'll change, or after this point I'll change my priorities. It never comes. Those deadlines always keep extending. The hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam sat there and he marked it out on the ground, and he says, this is the life of an individual, and he drew a box, and then he drew a line extending outside of that box, and he said, these are the whims and the desires of an individual. It's not. Remember, the Prophet ﷺ is not saying things negative about us. He's saying that's our fitrah. That's how we've been created. He's telling us that you don't feel bad about yourself that you think like that, but do something about it. Know that that's going to be within you. That you're going to be planning this many steps ahead, and you're going to have a vision of this, and you're going to think, this many years I'll have done this, and I'll have done this, and I'll have done this. No problem. Have that plan for the dunya, but have that plan for the akhirah. But don't let it be that after 2 years, once I've done the dunya, I'll come on to the akhirah. It doesn't work like that. It will never work like that. And so we have to understand that as you'll watch people going through their lives, they'll come to these milestones. And every time they will hit that milestone, they will find a little more emptiness therein. And like I said to you, you will hit the peak of the milestone. Just after that peak, you will feel that emptiness. You will hit the next milestone. Just after that milestone, you will find that emptiness, because it's not what the heart and the soul desires. And so, وَبِكَثْرَةِ الْهَوَى وَحُبِّ الْعَاجِلَةِ مَغْمُورٌ. This person is besotted and he's lost and is heedless in acquiring the immediate. He's intoxicated, he's drunk. بِكَثْرَةِ الْهَوَى. Kasra is the Arabic word Ibn al-Qayyim is using. The intoxication of your desires and your love for the immediate. Your love for instant gratification is maghmurun. It's fouling your mind. That I have to have it now. I have to have it now. This idea of patience, or this idea of it can come later. And this is the time that we live in. This is the time that we live in. It's not necessarily our fault as such. It's just the way we're being hardwired now, and it's the rewiring of ourselves. Where if my internet doesn't load instantly, it's an issue. If I can't get this thing next day delivery or by tonight, 24-hour delivery, it's an issue. If I can't acquire this, if I can't get that, if I want this, I'll go there. If I need this, there's no worry about export and import and these things anymore. And as this happens with everything else in our life, we want it with spirituality as well. I want shortcuts. I want to cut the corners, and I want to see how can I get this, and how can I acquire this, and how can I acquire this. And so because we don't get that, we do the only thing we know. What do we know? The only thing we know is, if I can't become pious, let me look pious. Let me put filters on. I can't develop beauty. Let me just put some filters on and I'll just pretend to be beautiful and show people that I'm beautiful. I can't become pious, so let me put on this facade of piety. Let me show this faux piety, F-A-U-X piety, this fake piety, this pseudo piety. And that's what we'll end up doing. The road to piety and the road to righteousness isn't the easy road. The easy road is look pious, act pious. People will be convinced you're pious. Hopefully people won't dig too deep. But the reality is, the author's pointing out here, is that this is all this person's focus is. The temporal, the very quick fixes. The tarbiyah and the islah and the reformation of the heart isn't a quick fix. It's not, the paracetamol that you're looking for. It might be an operation you have to do. It might mean that you have to take some time out and spend time in a hospital. It might mean that you have to distance yourself from the things of this dunya. And sometimes you have to go in for treatments 5 times a day in the masjid. Sometimes you have to go and find a doctor, a specialist, and you have to say, this is the issue I'm struggling with. This is the mess I've got myself in spiritually. How do I pull myself out of that? يُنَادَى إِلَى اللَّهِ وَإِلَى الدَّارِ الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ مَكَانٍ بَعِيدٍ. And this dead heart, it calls out to Allah and it calls out to the next life from a distance. It's not even interested. It's just echoes of piety. It's just echoes of I want to be righteous. When you interrogate it, you realize it's not what this person really wants. It actually annoys them to be pious. It actually worries them. What if this person becomes pious? What if I become too pious? I can't live like that. I can't be that person. Surely not. I don't want to be over the top pious. And so, فَلَا يَسْتَجِيبُ لِلنَّاصِحِ وَيَتَّبِعُ كُلَّ شَيْطَانٍ مَرِيدٍ. And neither does this person respond to the advisor. Somebody comes in your life who Allah sends your way. On Saturday, we were doing one of the ahadith, and we started our discussion on faith in angels, belief in angels. And when we were going through the belief in angels, the hadith I started with first was the very famous hadith of Bukhari, where there were 3 individuals with illnesses. And an angel came to them and asked them, what do you want? And they said, we want this illness cured. And the angel then asked, okay, what do you want in terms of property? And one asked for camel, and one asked for sheep, and one asked for a cow. And so they were given these animals, and these animals then grew, and they were pregnant, and they produced and produced and produced. After this whole process, that angel returns in the state looking like a man, in the same illnesses that these people had. And the angel says to them, can you help me? I'm blind. You were blind at one stage. And he goes to the other guy and he says, I'm this, and you had this issue, and I've got the same issue. And those people say, nah, we've never been like this. We don't know what you're talking about. And so they say, we want nothing to do with you. And so the angel actually says, you were never like this. And they say, no, we were never like this. The angel says, if you're lying to me, then may Allah return you the way you were. The only person who said the truth was the blind person. And I said this hadith, and I said, and by the way, Allah removed everything from the other 2 and He kept it for the 3rd. And I mentioned this hadith to explain to us that when we're talking angels, the first thing you have to understand is angels exist in the ghaib. On the fabric of our existence, they exist around us. Every time there's a baby who's about to fall and hurt themselves, there's an angel present there. And there's an angel present in constantly. And our objective isn't to learn these are the names of the angels. I'm not really interested necessarily in the name of angels. It doesn't do anything for me. I'm interested to know, what are the angels doing on a day-to-day basis around me? What do I need to know? There's an angel that goes up at the time of Fajr and the time of Asr, and they come and do shifts. And Allah asks them, how did you leave this person? And the angels respond, we left them doing this and we left them doing this. That makes me think about those specific times. There's a hadith that talk about 70,000 angels with you when you go to visit a sick person, an ill person. 70,000 is an interesting number. That's the same number of angels that do tawaf of the Kaaba in the heavens. And so Allah sends that many angels. There are angels who are present, patrolling the streets, who find a circle of knowledge and they gather around that. Angels were created for the worship of Allah, the obedience of Allah. Their worship and their ibadah is to do this. There are angels who spread their wings at the feet of people who come to study knowledge. Every one of us that walked here, every one of us that came here, most of us didn't want to. Exciting thing to do. We can find 101 things to do. All of us can. But the fact that we came here, Allah says this angel is not going to do sajda, it's not going to do ruku, it's going to spread its wings at your feet. That's its ibadah. That's its worship. And that's more than what Allah did for Adam alayhi salam. For Adam alayhi salam, it was prostrate. For me and you, it's the angels are spreading their wings at our feet. And so this point over here, that this person, advice comes to him, but he doesn't take it. And I said the whole point I went to the angel tangent is because there are angels who are present amongst us in our entire life. And we don't know when we're interacting with angels. That's the reality of it. We never know. The hadith of Bukhari tells us that these people were interacting with angels without knowing of it. And we could be doing the same on a daily basis. And that's why Allah has angels. Angels don't exist because Allah needs the help. I'm sure you've all asked yourself at some stage or another, why does Allah need angels? What's the point? Allah can take the death of a person, the life of a person without Israel and the angel of death. They don't exist for Allah's help. They're not like Oompa Loompas or something, minions that are helping Allah. That's not how it works. It's not how this world works. Allah has them present for me and you to realize that there's something I should be thinking around in my daily life that connects to Allah. There's 2 verses in the Quran that talk about angels, specifically in an order. That they mention Allah, the angels, then the books and the prophets. In Allah wa malaikata, Allah, malaika, and then the kutub and the rusul. آمنا بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله. It doesn't mention the books first, it doesn't mention the prophets first, it's Allah and the angels first. In those 2 places he does that. And so again, a person has to reflect that our faith has to be practical. I've gone over to the Saturday discussions, but coming back here he says, وَيَتَّبِعُ كُلَّ شَيْطَانٍ مَرِيدٍ. He doesn't take the advice. Somebody comes to us, and because remember, it's the nafs we're talking about. It's the nafs we're talking about, the heart. When the heart has reached a stage where it's kind of fully engrossed in the disobedience of Allah, it finds it bitter when somebody gives advice. But ask yourself, isn't medicine supposed to be bitter? Isn't the things that are bitter in life supposed to be the things that are supposed to be good for us? Aren't those the things that are supposed to be beneficial for us? So maybe I should swallow that. Maybe I should swallow that bitter pill that somebody's giving me. And I should put my head down and I should say, no, you're right. Make dua for me. And I'll make an effort from today. وَكُلَّ شَيْطَانٍ مَرِيدٍ. And he follows every inclination or every invitation from the devil. الدُّنْيَا تُسْخِطُهُ وَتُرْضِيهِ. And the dunya is the only thing that pleases this person and the only thing that pains this person. There's nothing else, there's no other concern. Right? There's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from this statement of Ibn al-Qayyim, which hadith is probably makes sense to mention here. There's the hadith is man kanat ad-dunya hamma. That person who the dunya is their sole objective, their sole purpose. We're all adults here. We're not children. I don't need to explain to you what I mean by the dunya being your sole purpose. Very simply, it means when you have to choose between dunya and akhirah, you choose dunya. It doesn't mean don't run after dunya and don't acquire the dunya and don't get your dunya. Get as much of the dunya as you want. I can name to you various Sahaba who are the richest people of Makkah and Medina. The point that I'm making here is they never made a decision of dunya that superseded the decision of the akhirah. When I have to make a decision of dunya and akhirah, that's the metric. Don't confuse things. I've told you, you want the metric of piety, look at your private life and compare it with your public life. Private life is better, then you are righteous. If your public life is better than your private life, you've got work that needs to be done. Similarly, the metric of whether you are a person of the dunya or you are abna'ud dunya, abna'ul akhirah. You're a person of this world or you're a person of the akhirah. When a decision is to be made, and you have to make a decision, do I select akhirah or do I select dunya here? Which one do I give precedence to? If you give precedence to the akhirah, you are a person of the akhirah, even if that means you're raking in millions. And so, man kanat ad-dunya hamma. That person who the dunya is their primary objective. فَرَّقَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ أَمْرَهُ. Allah scatters their affairs. Hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I remind you, Don't sit here thinking that these are just nice things to listen to. If there's if there's one thing that should be the focus of these talks, it should be these statements of the Prophet ﷺ. It should be these ahadith. It should be these types of things. And when the Prophet ﷺ says something, that's gospel, to use a a phrase. That's any definitive yaqeen. You know. And so من كانت الدنيا همه فرق الله عليه أمره. Allah scatters their affairs. وجعل فقره بين عينيه. Allah places poverty in front of them. Just constantly, I need more. I don't have enough. I need a bit more of this. I need a bit more of this. I've got a goal. I need to purchase this, and then and after that I'm going to do. After that I need to do this. After that I need to do this. I've got this much now, but just a little bit more. جعل فقره بين عينيه ولم يأتي من الدنيا إلا ما كتب له. This person receives nothing from the dunya except that which is written. It's marzuq. It's written. لا رازق إلا الله. Allah is the raziq. He's the one who's fixed it. That's it. You'll get what you're written. ومن كانت الآخرة نيته. The hadith continues, whoever's objective and intention is akhirah, جمع الله له أمره. جمع الله, Allah is the fa'il, the doer. Allah will gather this person's affairs. Not £5 there and £10 there and half a job there and 20% there and 5% there. Allah will gather this person's affairs. وجعل غناه في قلبه. Allah won't fill your bank accounts. Allah won't fill your pockets. Allah will enrich your heart. That's really what matters, isn't it? When a person is content in the heart, that's really what matters. That's the rich person. That's the person Allah's given to. The person who's not thirsting after other people's wealth. The person who doesn't look at other people's clothing and other people's cars and other people's money and other people's blessings and thinks to themselves, I need to get that. And maybe they even pity that person. That's the objective of your existence. That's what you run after. That's what you humiliate yourself for. وَجَعَلَ غِنَاهُ فِي قَلْبِ. Allah places ghina in this person's heart. Allah enriches this individual's heart. Ghina is from the names of Allah, istighna, al-ghani, the one who's independent, the one who doesn't need others. Right? What's the other hadith about az-zuhd? Izhad fima inda Allah, yuhibbuk Allah. Izhad, detach yourself and have a hatred. Another hadith of Prophet ﷺ, izhad fima inda Allah. Detach yourself and abstain, have this abstinence from فيما عند ازهد في الدنيا, have abstinence from this world. يحبك الله, Allah will love you. وازهد فيما عند الناس, and have this abstinence from what people had. يحبك الناس, the people will love you. Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Distance yourself. Don't be thirsty for other people's blessings. And so جمع الله له أمره وجعل غناه في قلبه وأتته الدنيا وهي راغمة. The hadith finishes with the Prophet ﷺ says, the dunya will come to this person in a state of humiliation. وهي راغمة. The dunya will be humiliated. The dunya will come to this person's feet. These are the words of the Prophet ﷺ. Allama ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayhi, if I'm correct, he says, this dunya is like a shadow. A shadow, that you chase after a shadow. You'll be running for the rest of your life. How do you get the shadow to chase after you? Run in the opposite direction. Run in the opposite direction, your shadow will be forced to follow you. And so khair, some tangents there, but فَلَا يُسْتَجِيبُ لِلنَّاسِ وَيَتَّبِعُ كُلَّ شَيْطَانٍ مَرِيدٍ. الدُّنْيَا تُسْخِطُهُ وَتُرْضِيهِ. The dunya pains him and pleases him, meaning nothing is the concern of this individual other than the dunya. وَالْهَوَى يُسِمُّهُ عَمَّا سِوَى الْبَاطِلِ وَيُعْمِيهِ. And your desires blind you from everything that is batil, وَيُعْمِيهِ, and they completely make you blind and they completely make you deaf. فَهُوَ فِي الدُّنْيَا كَمَا قِيلَ فِي لَيْلَى. And this person is like, in this dunya, he lives like it's mentioned regarding Layla. Who's Layla? He mentions a poem here. It's a famous couple. They weren't even couples, to be fair, initially. Majnoon and Layla. It's a story of two people. Majnoon, he was known Majnoon from the word Junoon. He was crazy. He was besotted in love with somebody. And Layla is the girl he was in love with. And so Majnoon had some poetry that he would say. And his poetry was, Arabs were really good with poetry and the things that you'll find your movies consist of. There's certain themes like love, war, various things. Arabs would write on the very same things, and all of these stories are very similar. They have the same blueprint. عدو لمن عادت وسلم لأهلها ومن قربت ليلى أحب وقربا. He'd say this poem, and he's saying that the nafs becomes like this regarding the dunya. عدو لمن عادت. I am an enemy to whoever she is an enemy to. وَسِلْمٌ لِأَهْلِهَا, and I am a friend to her family members. And that's how we'll become. We will be enemies. When a person loves this dunya, you're an enemy to anybody who's an enemy of the dunya. If the dunya, like anything that comes in the way of your dunya, you're an enemy to. And you're a friend and you're a family member to the family members of this dunya. Anything that will acquire you this world. وَمَنْ قَرَّبَتْ لَيْلَى أَحَبَّ وَقَرَّبَ. And whoever Layla draws close to, then he would love and favor them in that same way. And it's this idea of your attachment. And this is again, you see this with the broken heart, you see this with the dead heart, but you should also think about this with the living heart. The heart that sees anybody drawing closer to Allah, you draw closer to them. Anybody who is connecting you to Allah, you draw closer to them. But this is the dead heart. And so he says, فَمُخَالَطَةُ صَاحِبِ هَذَا الْقَلْبِ سُقْمٌ. And he concludes this discussion, and he's going to expand on the three hearts a little further, but he says that this is the definition of that heart. And he says, فَمُخَالَطَةُ صَاحِبُ هَذَا الْقَلْبِ سُقْمٌ. To mix and to spend time with the possessor of this heart is suqmun. It's an illness. It's an illness. And I'll go a step further and say, it's a very dangerous illness. Like it's a fatal illness. It's not something, you're worried about COVID and you do social distancing from somebody with COVID or something like this. This suqmun, this illness, this is something which will take down your heart. This is something that will ruin the heart. وَمُعَاشَرَتُهُ سُمٌّ. And to spend time with this type of person, it's ingesting poison. وَمُجَالَسَتُهُ هَلَاكٌ. And to keep this person's company will lead to your ruin. Why? The suhbah has an effect. Now look, the reality is sometimes we are forced to be in the company of these types of people. When you go to work, if you're in certain offices where there's this constant rat race and this constant focus on trying to do this, you have to know how much poison you're consuming, and you have to offset that with the cure. You have to know, to what degree do I have to engage in this? If a person is working in an industry where there is things and material that is going to be harmful to them, you have to know how to reduce that harm. You have to know what PPE equipment you require. You need to know what things you need to put into as safeguards, what steps you can't overmark, or you can't go beyond these limits. Faslun. And then the third type of heart, وَالْقَلْبُ الثَّالِث قَلْبٌ لَهُ حَيَاةٌ وَبِهِ عِلَّةٌ. Allah protect us from the dead heart. وَالْقَلْبُ الثَّالِث, the third heart, قَلْبٌ لَهُ حَيَاةٌ وَبِهِ عِلَّةٌ. The third heart is the heart that has life within it, وَبِهِ عِلَّةٌ, but it also has an illness. It's afflicted with an illness. فَلَهُ مَادَّتان. And it's sustained by two things. تَمُدُّهُ هَذِهِ مَرَّةٌ وَهَذِهِ أُخْرَى. And it's sometimes pulled towards this side, and it's sometimes pulled towards the other. وَهُوَ لِمَا غَلَبَ عَلَيْهِ مِنْهُمَا. And it belongs to whichever overpowers it in that moment. فَفِيهِ مِنْ مَحَبَّةِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى وَالْإِيمَانِ بِهِ وَالْإِخْلَاصِ لَهُ وَالتَّوَكُّلُ عَلَيْهِ. This heart contains within it the love of Allah, and it contains within it faith, and it contains wanting to be sincere for Allah and to rely on Him only. ما هو مادة حياته. All those things that are the madda of its hayah, the core of its existence, the things that are going to keep it alive. وفيه من محبة الشهوات. But at the same time, it also has this love for desires, وإيثارها, and the preference for that, والحرص على تحصيلها, and the acquisition of those desires, والحسد, it also has jealousy, والكبر, and pride, والعجب, and vanity, وحب العلو في الأرض بالرياسة, and it wants to have status in this earth by gaining some position. It wants to be acknowledged. It wants to be recognized. It wants people to say that you're somebody, you're this. ما هو مادة هلاكه وعطبه. All of these things that are a cause and a root to its destruction and its ruin. It has these things. وهو ممتحن بين داعيين. And so this heart is tested between these two callers, these two people inviting from one side and the other. داع يدعوه إلى الله ورسوله والدار الآخرة. One is inviting to Allah. One is inviting to His Messenger. One is inviting to the Akhirah. And you think about it. It's inviting to Allah, Darus Salam, peace. وَدَاعٍ يَدْعُوهُ إِلَى الْعَاجِلَةِ. And there is another inviting him to the temporary, to the immediate pleasures. وَإِنَّمَا يُجِيبُ أَقْرَبَهُمَا مِنْهُ بَابًا. And whichever in that moment has the greatest sway on him, he sways towards that. وَأَدْنَاهُمَا إِلَيْهِ جِوَارًا. And he moves away from that which is furthest from him. فَالْقَلْبُ الْأَوَّلِ حَيٌّ. And so that's the conclusion of that third heart. That the heart responds to whichever door is closest to it. And this is why I've said to you guys again and again, and I'll say this to myself, to yourself. Dhikr, remembrance of Allah, is not what you do with your tongue necessarily. Don't limit it to that. We need to transform our entire definition of dhikr. And I'm hesitant to say it's wrong, but I want to say it's wrong, entirely wrong, the way we look at dhikr. And there's 5 or 6 words I can put in front of you and say the vast majority of us have the completely wrong definition of this. Dhikr is simply remembrance of Allah. What does that mean? Dhikr is different for different people. You see, you have to curate your list of dhikr. What is that? What do I mean by that? There are certain verses and certain hadith that you will come across. You are made of a different temperament to everybody else. Allah knows that we're not uniform. Allah knows we're not all the same. Personalities are different. We vary. Some people respond well to fear. Some people respond well to hope. Some people respond well to emotions. Some people get emotional over certain stories. Some people don't. Some people, it affects people differently. Some people need anger to get them moving. Some people need, different people are different. When you go through hadith and when you go through verse of the Quran, what moves you? Which verses move you? Which hadith move you? What was that narration or what was that hadith that really affected you? Because if you experience that once in your life, you better write that down. Because in your moments of weakness, when you're about to incline towards sin, your dhikr is not astaghfirullah. Your dhikr is to read that hadith. Your dhikr is to read that verse of the Quran that moved you in that moment and to remember that experience. When we did the i'tikaf, when we did the retreat in the month of Ramadan, we've also done the 24-hour retreats. Every single time we do those retreats, I sit down with everybody present and I say, here's a book and write down a letter to yourself. In that moment, you're spiritually present. In that moment, you're what you might call cringe in that moment. And so you will write a letter to yourself. And that letter, I've met grown men, 50 years old, 40 years old, who participated in that retreat, say to me, there's times I'll sit in the night where I'll just read that letter and I'll cry. Why? There's something moving about a spiritual state that you're in, and you writing to yourself in that moment what you felt, what your intentions were, what your objectives were, what your promises were. And when you come back into the dunya, that happens, or you'll sometimes pull away from that. You have to curate your list of dhikr. That's dhikr. It's different for every person. It's never the same. It's never the same thing. You know, those narrations you hear of somebody who's climbing up the ladder and is about to commit a sin, entering into the home of another, and he hears the recitation of Quran and he hears the verse, أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَمَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ. Has a time not come for the believing individuals and their hearts tremble out of fear and they connect to Allah? Why is it that you'll read narrations and that you'll read stories of scholars who stood in salah, in tahajjud, in the night, repeating one verse the entire night? That was their dhikr. But we haven't identified our dhikr. I'm speaking to non-Muslims who have read the Quran 3 times over, and I'm sat in front of Muslims who haven't read even a quarter of the Quran in translation, who haven't read a single juz in translation. How are we going to find our dhikr? How am I going to find meaning in this religion? How am I going to find that this religion is more than just tokenistic actions, and it's more than just, these motions and these things, rituals that I do? How am I going to bring life into this dhikr? So, Sheikh Ilyas, one of the scholars of the past, he would mention that our iman and our existence and the existence of the Sahaba, the difference is, imagine you put a painting of a lion in the room. Nobody's scared of it. The most hyperrealistic, realistic drawing that you can get, it doesn't scare you. But put a lion in the room and that's going to scare somebody. That's the difference between our faith and the faith of the Sahaba. Ours, it looks like faith on the outside, but on the inside, it's not really faith. It doesn't push us and motivate us to do the things that it should make us do, because it's not real. It's what we it's this makeshift, make-believe faith. And that's what we need to transform. That's what we need to change. And that's the dhikr. And that's what Ibn al-Qayyim is going to be talking about. But I'm pointing this out here, that the heart is inclining towards sin and good. If you find your heart to be in that state, then identify your dhikr, identify your medicine, identify your cure, and present that to yourself. Different people operate differently. Some people will say to themselves, if I commit this sin, I will pray 2 rak'at. That doesn't work for everybody. Some people are like me, lazy. You'll say, forget the 2 rakat and forget this. I'll just make tawbah and this and that. Depends on the person. Some people will hold themselves to it. Some people will say, every time I sin, I'll put a pound in. By the end of the first month, you're like, this is, I'm in deficit here. I'm in debt. It's like, I might as well have invested in crypto. That's how much money I've lost. Like, different people are different. You have to identify your dhikr. You have to identify that thing which will wash away that negligence. And the prophets had their dhikr as well. Yusuf alayhi salam, look at him in his moment of weakness when he's present in front of that woman. And he says, what's the verse that he says? معاذ الله إنه ربي أحسن مثواي إنه لا يفلح الظالمون. Is he speaking to the woman? He's not lecturing the woman. He says, معاذ الله. She's making advances. He's not saying Allah's protection to her. He's like closed his eyes and he's talking to معاذ الله. إنه ربي, he is my Lord. أحسن مثواي, he did good with me. He's not talking to her saying, he's your Lord. He's saying, it's my Lord. إنه لا يفلح الظالمين, my Allah, he does not do good with the ظالمون. That's his dhikr he needs in that moment. The verse mentions hamma biha, he inclined towards her, but he had his dhikr. If that's your dhikr, write it down, memorize it. If that's your dhikr, then you have to look through the stories of the prophets and you'll find they had their dhikr. That's dhikr. Because remembrance is remembering something you've forgotten. And you've forgotten that Allah did everything for you. And He created you and He did everything for us. And that's what you have to develop. And dhikr doesn't look the same for everybody else. For you, it might be a certain video. For you, it might be a certain this. It might even be something that you did not expect. Something you saw of the Palestinian people that really kind of rendered you to tears. And you've saved that, you've bookmarked that, and you go back to that in your moments of weakness saying, this is their strength, where's my strength? Whatever that dhikr looks for you, whatever it looks like for you, you have to find it. And that's how you'll find that balance. And that's why this word you'll keep coming across, and he mentioned it. وَالْغَفْلَةُ مُرَكِّبُهُ, ghafla, negligence. The opposite of dhikr is ghafla. In your moments of ghafla, when a person is negligent, when a person is driving and they're now falling asleep, that's negligence. What does that person do? He opens the window. Something radical he does. In that speed, 80, 90 miles an hour, however fast, 70 miles an hour. He's driving 70 miles an hour. He'll open the window. Why do something so radical? To wake yourself up. He's driving. There's one guy who used to go on certain journeys with, and when this person would feel sleepy, we'd all fall asleep in the car. When this guy would feel sleepy, you'd wake up to a shh, and you'd look, and he's spraying himself in the eyes with this bottle of water that he has, and he's just like a shh, like that. You have to do something radical. That's what you have to do. That's what dhikr is. It's something radical against the nafs. It's in that moment. And so the author says, فَالْقَلْبُ الْأَوَّلْ حَيٌّ مُخْبِتٌ لَيِّنٌ وَاعٍ. The first type of heart is that heart which is living. حَيٌّ. It's living. مُخْبِتٌ, humble, لَيِّنٌ, soft, وَاعٍ. It's aware. It's tender. And you see that. Remember I said to you, the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, your heart is a representation of your actions. If your heart is a certain way, you will see it in your actions. And so that heart is soft, it's gentle. Not meaning it's soft and gentle in the heart, but you see that on that person. وَالثَّانِي يَابِسٌ مَيِّتٌ. The second heart, it's dry, it's dead. It's devoid of life. It doesn't have anything. وَالثَّالِثُ مَرِيضٌ. And the third type of heart is the ill heart, the diseased heart. فَإِمَّا إِلَى السَّلَامَةِ أَدْنَى وَإِمَّا إِلَى الْعَطَبِ أَدْنَى. Sometimes it inclines towards good, and sometimes it inclines towards sin. It inclines towards each. وَقَدْ جَمَعَ اللَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ بَيْنَ هَذِهِ الْقُلُوبِ الثَّلَاثَةِ فِي قَوْلِهِ. And if you want to understand, when Allah talks about these three types of hearts in the Quran, understand this. لِيَجْعَلَ مَا يُلْقِي الشَّيْطَانُ فِتْنَةً لِلَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ. This is the part. The prophets, Allah preserved their hearts. Allah protected their hearts from shaitan influencing them. But what about us? لِيَجْعَلَ مَا يُلْقِي الشَّيْطَانُ فِتْنَةً لِلَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. Why? Allah made the temptations of shaitan a fitna, a test. لِلَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ. For those in whose hearts there is an illness. وَالْقَاسِيَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ. And to harden their hearts. Or those hearts that are hardened. You see, I remember when I said to you guys that we have hearts, and shaitan will tug at these heartstrings. There is a weakness in the heart, there is a this in the heart, there is that in the heart, and we allow that to fester and we allow that to bubble and to grow. That's what shaitan will tug at. That's his opening. Our job is to preserve that heart. Allah mentioned in the Quran here that the prophets are preserved and protected. But who isn't protected and preserved? Those people in whose hearts there is an illness. You have to identify that illness. For different people, it's different things. Now, certain gender, the men will have certain illnesses, by and large, they will incline towards those. Women will have certain illnesses, they will incline towards those. And then there will be a mix of a kind of Venn diagram of sorts, where there will be men have these, women have these by tendency, and then there is the overlap that both men and women can get these. And that's the identification that Ibn al-Qayyim is going to do, because Ibn al-Qayyim's whole objective of this is that person who's drowning in the disobedience of Allah and they need that lifeline, what are the traps of shaitan that shaitan is using? And so وَالْقَاسِيَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ, that hardness of the hearts. وَإِنَّ الظَّالِمِينَ لَفِي شِقَاقٍ بَعِيدٍ, and the zalimeen, the wrongdoers, the people who are oppressing themselves by doing sins, they are لَفِي شِقَاقٍ بَعِيدٍ, they are distant from the truth. They are in this kind of loss. They are in this, kind of complete shiqaq is this kind of where a person is broken apart, split apart. Shaqqa is where you cut something open. Fi shiqaqin ba'id, this person is so distant, they're so confused, they're so lost. They have no direction, they have no understanding of where they need to go, what they need to do. وَلِيَعْلَمَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكَ. And then Allah says, so that the people of knowledge, they can know أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكَ, it's the truth from your Lord. The people of knowledge will know that this is shaitan playing on us. So there's three sets of people mentioned in this. There was the prophets, then there was those hearts that have illness, and there was the people of knowledge that they can know. فَيُؤْمِنُوا بِهِ, they will bring faith. فَيُخْبِتَ لَهُ قُلُوبُهُم, and they would humble their hearts before Allah. وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَهَادِي الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ, and Allah will guide those individuals, those believers, towards the straight path. The author says, فَجَعَلَ اللَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى الْقُلُوبِ فِي هَذِهِ الْآيَاتِ ثَلَاثَةً. Allah mentioned three types of hearts in this Quran. قَلْبَيْنِ مَفْتُونَيْنِ وَالْقَلْبَ النَّاجِيًا. Two of the hearts are tested. They go through trials and tribulations. Again, this word fitna. This word fitna that we kind of see as this really bad word and this terrible word that, oh, it's a fitna, it's a challenge, it's a fitna. Understand what fitna means. Fitna comes from the word fatana. Fatana means to test something. So the Arabs, they have a saying, fatantu dhahab al-fidda. I tested the gold and the silver. What does that mean? Fatana means that you take the gold and silver and you put it into a furnace. You see, gold and silver, they have impurities, especially when you go mining and you take the ore of this gold ore and silver ore and these different ores out. Ore is basically the gold mixed with impurities, with maybe other metals or other rocks or other different things, and you put it into certain temperatures, and you know that the gold melts at a certain temperature, and the other impurities will melt at a lower temperature, and so you're able to distill and separate them. That fitna purifies and cleans a person. A fitna is something which is going to distinguish your impurities from your purities. It's going to show that which is legitimate. Allah is going to put you under pressure in your life. Allah is going to put you into difficult situations. Allah is going to test you financially. Allah is going to put you in circumstances where you have to make a difficult decision. Do I take this haram money or not? Allah is going to put you into difficult circumstances where you have to make a decision. Do I go down this illicit relationship or not? Allah is going to put you into difficult circumstances where you have to make these decisions. And that fitna, that thing which is really hard and difficult for you, and it's extreme, immense pressure in that moment, that's going to distinguish the purity from the impurity. Everything is a fitna. Everything is a fitna. When Allah says wealth is a fitna, don't think it's a bad thing. Fitna doesn't mean bad thing. Fitna means that this wealth is going to be a means of you determining what are your priorities. Do I sacrifice Allah or do I sacrifice some of that wealth? What's the priorities here? That's what a fitna is. You're going to be put under some pressure. It's going to be difficult for a period of time. And Allah will then alleviate that pressure. And when you come out of that, you will come out in a state connected to Allah, closer to Allah, in a more pristine state. That's fitna. That's what fitna really looks like. The fitna of Dajjal is exactly the same. The fitna of wealth is exactly the same. Otherwise, why is that in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ shows so much love to his children and his grandchildren, and there's a hadith and the verse of the Quran that say your children are a fitna? It's because we don't understand the word fitna. We think, oh, our children are a fitna. It's such a bad thing. Look, the Quran says children are fitna. It's because you don't understand these basic words. I don't understand these words. And then I come to these conclusions. Fitna is something that Allah will give me. And Allah, by means of how I behave with this child, how I interact with this child, if I do well by this child, and if I raise this child in a certain way, and I fulfill the rights of this child, and I make sure that this child is taken care of, and this and that, etc. The ahadith that talk about a person who raises two daughters, that person is going to be from the people of Jannah, etc. Various ahadith that talk about these things. A fitna is that. Everything is a fitna. When people came to me and they said to me, as an example, when I know there's people who don't like, you're not big fans of COVID. I'm not picking sides here. I'm just going to give you an example. When people ask, is COVID a fitna? Is it a test? Is it a punishment from Allah? First of all, this idea of me making the determination of if is something a punishment from Allah, there's nobody on this earth who can make that determination. If any fitna happens to this ummah and somebody asks, is this a punishment from Allah? And somebody says, yes, this is a punishment from Allah. Respectfully, I will say to you, be very careful of that person's comments. Nobody can make a determination if something is a punishment. I'll tell you what a punishment is from Allah. A punishment is simply, if something takes you further from Allah, that's a punishment. If something takes you closer to Allah, that's a blessing. If you get COVID and you die from that COVID, but that COVID brought you closer to Allah, that's the greatest blessing that came into your life. And if you received an inheritance fund from somebody who passed away and you received all that money, but it took you away from Allah, that's a punishment from Allah. That's how we define punishment, and that's how we define blessing. A blessing is that which takes us closer to Allah. A believer doesn't think in this world from the dunya, the lens of the dunya. A believer thinks from the lens of the akhirah. Did this bring me in proximity to Allah? I lost my wealth, I lost my house, I lost this, I lost that. Did it bring me closer to Allah? That was the greatest blessing that I had. I don't see it yet. I'll see it very soon. And if not in this world, I'll see it in the next life. And all of that money and all of this that you made, and this is why we make things like istikhara. Istikhara is the dua where you ask Allah for goodness. Any decision you make istikhara for, there will be good in it. You might not think in the short term it has good, or in the mid-term it has good, but in the long term it definitely has good for you. You have to trust in Allah's process. Allah knows what He's doing. Allah knows exactly what He's doing. And so, these things that Allah has given us, they allow us to make decisions and make determinations that are going to bring us closer to Him. And that's fitna. And so this word that the author keeps using here as well as fitna, qalbayni maftunaini, there are two hearts that are going to be placed in the fitna. Wa qalban najin, and there's going to be a heart that's free from that. Falmaftunani, the two hearts that are going to go through fitna, al-qalbu alladhi fihi marad, the heart that has illness therein. Because that illness needs to be cleansed in some way. That illness needs to be cleansed and removed in some way. And so that's what Allah will do. Wal qalbul qasi, and the dead heart. The dead heart, the hard heart. That's going to have fitna. When naji, and the heart that's saved, al qalbul mu'minul mukhbit ila rabbihi, that heart which inclines towards Allah, wa al mutma'in ilayhi, and is pleased with Allah, al khadi'u lahu, that submits to Allah, al mustaslimul munqad, that which submits to Allah. وذلك أن القلب وغيره من الأعضاء يراد منه أن يكون صحيحا سليما لا آفة له. And so then he continues and says, look, ذلك أن القلب وغيره من الأعضاء, the heart is from those body parts, يراد منه أن يكون صحيحا سليما. Like every other organ, it's supposed to be sound, it's supposed to be whole, it's supposed to be perfect. لا آفة له, without illness. ليتأتى منه ما يهيئ له وخلق لأجله, so that it can incline towards that which it was created for. وخروجه عن الاستقامة إما بيبسه وقساوته. He says, this verse will tell you what you need to look out for. He says, Allah says that heart which shaitan will attack will be في قلوبهم مرض والقاسية قلوبهم, illness or hardness. These are the two things that we're going to focus on for a little while now, the author says. He says, these are the two things. What does it mean by illness? What does it mean by this hardness? This, it's a hard heart. It's a diseased heart. What does it mean? And so he says, a person who wants to be consistent, it's either imma biyubsihi, it's gone dry, it's died, it's because of the illnesses, or qasawati, or it's because it's gone hard. وعدم التأتي, and so he says, what happens to the heart is كاليد الشلاء. A hand which is paralyzed. There's a hand. You have a hand. You have veins. You have flesh. You have everything within that hand, but it just doesn't move. That's what the heart becomes like. You have the heart, you have the components of the heart, but it doesn't do what the heart's supposed to do. He says, why are you so surprised when I'm saying to you, you have a heart, but it's hardened, it can't do what it needs to do. When you can have a hand that has everything therein, and the doctors just say that's just a neurological issue. There's not a neural link between your brain and your hand. Everything else is there. Everything else is functional. Everything is. It's just something that's gone wrong somewhere where there's not a link that's connecting it. All right. A tangent that came to mind. We'll leave it for some other time. واللسان الأخرس والأنف الأخشم, like the tongue that doesn't operate, or the nose that cannot smell, والعين التي لا تبصر شيء, the eye that cannot see. You have the eye, but it can't see, right? It's got all of the functional things that it requires, but it just can't see. وإما بمرض وآفة فيه تمنعه من كمال هذه الأفعال, or it will be some illness that is limiting and restricting the function of these body parts. ووقوعها على السداد فلذلك انقسمت القلوب إلى هذه الأقسام الثلاثة. That's why we have split the heart into these three. فالقلب الصحيح السليم, that heart which is perfect and pristine and protected, ليس بينه وبين قبول الحق ومحبته وإيثاره سوى إدراكه. That it's such a heart that it doesn't struggle to accept the truth. It doesn't struggle to love Allah. فهو صحيح الإدراك للحق تام الانقياد والقبول له. It's submissive to Allah. والقلب الميت القاسي, that heart which is dead and it's hardened. That's the hardened heart. القسي, it's gone. لا يقبله ولا ينقاد له. It cannot accept anything. It seems like there's a layer or some غلف, which the Quran talks about, في قلوبهم مرض, and etc. etc. But we'll look at, as he mentions more on that. It's like it's got this layer. How did it get this layer? How did it get this hardened shell? There's verses that he's going to talk about. والقلب المريض, and that ill heart, the diseased heart. إن غلب عليه مرضه, as that illness intensifies, التحق بالميت القاسي, it hardens a little more. It goes closer towards that. وإن غلبت عليه صحته, and when he starts taking medication, and this person starts applying themselves, that heart goes towards التحق بالسليم, it starts moving towards that righteousness. It finds that effect of faith. It finds that connection with Iman. Think of it, and that's it. We'll conclude here. He's going to talk about how shaitan affects it, and we're going to look at that in next week. We've done the three types of hearts now. Now he's going to say specifically how shaitan influences, and he's going to mention a hadith that talk about the different types of heart, and he's going to bring it all together, and he's going to conclude. And so these discussions we should inshallah be able to conclude for next week. But he's going to mention that how does the heart go hard and all of these types of things, right? Again, there's a hadith that talk about these things. There's a hadith that talk about these things. And remember, I said to you, some people work differently. You see, I've been thinking about this even today. I was thinking about this specific hadith when I was reading on the hardened heart. And then I was thinking to myself of the hadith I've always said to you guys. There's a hadith of Musnad of Imam Ahmad where the Prophet ﷺ authentically narrates, and he says that when a person has a hard heart, there's two things that can soften the heart: visiting the graveyards, and second, Imran knows, passing your hand over the head of an orphan. So there's so many different things that are coming to my mind to mention about this hadith, right? The different types of people, I said to you, some are introverted, some are extroverted. The introverted person has to walk through a graveyard and just reflect on looking at gravestones, and that will soften their heart. Some people are extroverted. They can't, that stuff doesn't have an effect on them. So I always say as a joke kind of thing that, so then as masjids, what we should do is after every Jum'ah, we should just go pay an orphan for an hour and make them stand outside, and we should all just wipe our hands on their heads. Is that what the Sharia is saying? Is that our, like, how shallow our understanding of the religion is? How are you going to touch an orphan's head without you looking like a weirdo? You have to connect with them. This person doesn't have key people in their life. That means you have to take an interest in their life. That means you have to take an interest in their well-being. And you have to become like a fatherly figure, a motherly figure to this individual. And you have to become part of their life. Only then will you be able to put your hand anywhere near their heads. See, the Sharia is saying that there's different types of people. Some people, they'll do it in this way. And some people, they'll do it in that way. And these ahadith is so powerful in the sense that to soften a heart, you have to see somebody else's struggle. To soften a heart and to really kind of render that heart soft, you have to put yourself into somebody else's shoes. There's two types of people. There's sympathetic, empathetic. When you're walking through the grave, you're thinking empathy. What if I was in the shoes of these people in the grave? And when you're helping somebody who's an orphan, it's not empathy, it's sympathy. And from a psychological perspective, from a human kind of characteristic perspective of extroverts, introverts, from every perspective, how perfect is that hadith to soften the heart? The more you reflect on the words and the statements of the Prophet ﷺ, he says, to soften your heart, you've got to do these two things, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And so again, like this is not what the author is talking about now, but this is something for us to reflect on, that these cures are mentioned in the ahadith. You have to ask yourself, when was the last time I took a walk through a graveyard, not for me burying somebody? We don't visit the graveyard because we are people who are sad and sullen and depressed. We visit the graveyards to make ourselves better people. And the same thing with the orphan. We connect with that orphan child. We connect with those. And by the way, the scholars extrapolate and extend orphan, and they say not just orphan, but anybody within your community who falls into that category of needing something, whether that's widows, whether that's orphans, whether that's oppressed fathers, whether that's different people in your community. Hadith of Bukhari mentions that the Sahaba were in a battlefield, and the Prophet ﷺ said to them, إِنَّمَا تُنْصَرُونَ بِضُعَفَائِكُمْ. Your assistance in the battlefield only comes as a result of du'afa'akum, the weak amongst you. The Prophet ﷺ said the metric of your success and victory as a community will be on how you as a community, how you as a family, how you as a person treat the weak amongst you. How dismissive am I of that person who needs something? How dismissive am I of the weak in the society? You see, understanding the Sharia, there is so much for us to study yet. As you study, that ilm will allow you to do dhikr, the real dhikr, to reflect on the things that really need reflecting on. It's not just with the tongue, it becomes then something where Friday, every Saturday, every Sunday, maybe I make a practice. So I go, and Friday I say because it's the end of the week, but you might do it on a Monday, you might do it on a Sunday, whenever you might do it. You fix a walk through the graveyard, or you go there, or you go there. These things that a person has to do. Maybe you're visiting a soup kitchen, maybe you're visiting this, maybe you're going there, right? And you go to Palestine, you go to these types of places, etc. You can go and visit places where there's orphans, just whole hostels, the complete hostels in Jerusalem, where there's just orphans upon orphans, and you just take a little something for them, and the excitement on their faces, and you walk away so guilty. And for those few moments you're playing with them, you're like a parent to them, and you walk away guilty, and you're like, your heart is softened, and your heart is, it does something to an individual. And so again, like, you have to understand, this is the point that I'm making, that these are hadith and these verses exist for me and you to better ourselves. And so inshallah we'll continue with this next week, or we continue looking at these. Again, I don't want to rush things either. I want us to absorb, I want us to reflect. As I'm reflecting, you're also reflecting, you're thinking about your life, and you're putting it into the kind of, you're putting these words onto the real track of your life, and thinking and reflecting on how I can become a better person, how you can become a better person. May Allah give us the ability, inshallah. So next week we continue. We've just changed the time slightly this week because of the salah time, but inshallah we'll soon go back to 8 o'clock as soon as the salah times change, inshallah. Khair, subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Make sure you come back for the tea. There's tea on the women's side, there's tea on the brother side, inshallah. Straight after salah next one, then we'll come back for tea, inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu